Perfect. All right. We'll go ahead and call the Capital Funding Protection Committee meeting for December 7th, 2023 to order. Can I go ahead and have a roll call, please?
Paul Anderson. Clara Andriola.
Present.
Elise Bonkowski. Charlene Bybee.
Here.
Chris Cobb. Andrew Diss. Jeannie Herman.
Here.
Justin Ivory. Miguel Martinez. Devin Reese. Dave Solero.
Here.
That concludes roll call.
All right. Thank you very much. Before we jump too far into this agenda, I would like to request that we move actually the closing public comment up to the beginning, because we've got some people here to present a little something for the school district. So if it's all right with the group, I'd like to jump to item 3.01 and have public comment.
Megan Sizlove.
Excellent, thanks. Hi there, good afternoon. My name is Megan Sizlove, and I'm here today on behalf of American Public Works Association. I am a board member for the Northern Nevada chapter, or for the Nevada chapter. APWA, for those of you that don't know, we're an international organization of over 600,000 members. And in the state of Nevada, our chapter actually recently grew to be the second largest chapter in the western region with over 650 members. Our mission is to promote public works and provide education, training, certification, and networking to our members, as well as the public works community. We're grateful for the school district's long history of support and involvement in the Nevada chapter of APWA. Each year we host a spring conference in the south and a fall conference in the north, and during that time our agencies can submit projects to submit for Project of the Year in several different categories. And today I'm happy to present to Washoe County School District for the project of the new Proctor Hug High School project. They were the proud winners for structures of projects greater than $20 million. So if we could have the project team come up and maybe do a quick picture and present the award, that would be great.
No, because I gotta be over here so they can Photoshop me out.
Everybody say project of regional significance. Can you shorten that? I can't remember. Sorry.
Unlock it.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Larry. Look at that.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on this item?
Pablo Navaduran.
Pablo, you're up.
All right, here we go. All right, guys. So I want to say, so thanks for Adam Sisley and all the FIP team. But I know it's not on the agenda. I know it should be on agenda, but it's not on agenda. But I will not talk about the 50 school at all. But I want to say thank you for Adam Sisley and for the capital project team for making it happen at Hug High School. Where you look at New Hug High School that serve not just for a student with a higher income, but for lower social economics status stuff, but there are more to come. And then hopefully we should serve a better term for the school for next 10 or 15 years. So shout out to Adam seriously.
That's it? All right. Thank
No
you
more
very
public comment.
All right, very good. We'll take 3.01 off the agenda now. Moving on then to item 2.01, approval of the minutes for the August 3rd, 2023 meeting of the Capital Funding Protection Committee. Are there any comments on the minutes?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair.
Got a motion by Andreola. Second by Reese. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Takes us on to item 2.02, which is a presentation, discussion, and possible action to recommend approval of the draft final district-wide facility modernization plan by the Board of Trustees. So, Mr. Searcy.
Just a very brief intro, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for being here. For the record, Adam Searcy, Chief Operating Officer for the school district. In a moment, I'm going to introduce the floor to Paul Mills with Canon Design. But just by way of background, the school district's been engaged with Canon Design for over 18 months now, conducting a comprehensive assessment of our school facilities from the lens of equity, efficiency, and community. Just last week, the initial reading of this draft recommendation was presented to the Board of Trustees for information and discussion only and received rave reviews. This evening, Paul's going to walk you through the entirety of their work and the final recommendations in hopes of sending it to the school board with the endorsement or recommended for approval from the Capital Funding Protection Committee. So that's what this item this evening is. You've all heard multiple times from Paul on the work ongoing over the last year plus, and this is hopefully the culmination of all of that work and the beginning of much more to come. Thank you.
Great. It's a pleasure to be in front of you again and quickly go through what I presented from this very chair to the Board of Trustees a week ago. You should have a more detailed presentation than the one here. We have some excerpts here to really move it along, but that is of the record. And there's also now a 150-page document that backs up all of this work, but we're going to give you the high strokes of it. All right, so we're at the tail end of this process that, as Adam said, has been going on for 18 months. It's foundational in nature, and as this image here implies, it really starts with guiding principles overlaid with data, which went to an exploratory phase where we explored draft options. The last time I presented to you was to share with you those draft options that went before the community. And now we're at the point of decision-making, which leads to action. So this is presented to the Board of Trustees next Tuesday for acceptance and direction to staff to proceed with the implementation of the recommended actions. However, with the caveat that this doesn't supersede established policy and processes that are already in place for all sorts of things that are recommended within the FMP for capital projects, rezoning, grade reconfiguration, consolidations of schools, etc. So a quick recap of the options, all on one page here. I forget how many pages, but the tome that we had of all the draft options that were explored and vetted through the community with all of the feedback and community survey information is documented in our final report. But we've listed here in different geographical or grade configuration clusters of schools those options that had been presented to you and which are recommended, which are not recommended, and then ones that are flagged for continued study. In the areas of continued study, I will signal that in the Pine Middle School and its related feeder schools, that we've narrowed it down to options B and C with a recommended 2024 study of the pre-K through 8 grade configuration, of which there's only one example in your district at the very successful Mount Rose Academy for Language, which is a great study point, but also it's a different magnet signature type school, and we're recommending, in order to confirm whether or not pre-K 8 is the path forward for option C, that it be studied in depth, and that would require some investment of time and commitment, some exclusive staff to focus on it. Similarly, in the Trainer, Sparks, and Dilworth Middle School and their associated elementary schools, there's a similar scenario where the study of pre-K-8 would inform whether we proceed with option C or D. And then in the geographically remote areas of Gerlach, Incline, and Natchez Elementary School out in Wadsworth, that there be some focused continued study. It doesn't have to be long, but a recommended study phase which engages with the local communities around their unique cultures as well as circumstances due to their geographical notion. There are placeholders in the FMP for capital projects at all of those schools. However, there's an acknowledgement that the definition of those needs a little bit more work. So moving on to the recommendations, and really this is the punchline for the whole thing. This map here shows the investments. The size of each of those bubbles is representative of the investment of cost, and the types of outcomes for the different schools are listed there. And as you'll quickly glean from knowing where the crossroads of your major highways are, that the investments really are fulfilling the commitment of WC1 to invest in the core urban areas of Washoe County. And here's the big takeaways from it. All schools are improved within 15 years. And that's done with current funding sources, right? No new taxes, read my lips. This is about living within the very generous means that your community's already put forward for stewardship of your facilities, and all schools will be taken care of. Overcrowding eliminated district-wide. And because of the strategic, what we call the trade-up strategy implementation we'll talk about in a little bit, we have some avoided capital costs in the form of repurposed facilities that won't need to be renovated to the point of being whole new schools. They could serve a different function, which will have a bit more modest investment in those. $140 million over 15 years can be put to very good use. And here's the real punchline with this: the millions of dollars of operational savings that aren't just once, but year in and year out, because we are recommending the consolidation of schools and trading up to newer and fewer, well-equipped new facilities, that there will be annual savings that can be reinvested back into the classroom where it belongs from your general fund. And also, as I mentioned, the pre-K-8 exploration might be a whole new model and choice for improved access to quality programs in your communities. So just a bit about cost estimating. I know we're about the meat and potatoes and really what's about delivering capital projects here with this committee. And all the dollars that are expressed here are in baseline 2024 terms, with the assumption and understanding that due to the majority of your funding being associated with sales tax revenues, that will actually go up with time as well. So we're baselining it to that. And so we don't have to worry about all the escalation and calculating what year that certain projects take place, but there will be a reallocation and as a function of the management of the program. So what we're talking about is over $2 billion over 15 years. There's 109 projects and studies identified here, and I'm going to go from left to right to walk through the types of outcomes. So we have identified that there are some on-hold new school projects, specifically high school up in the Cold Springs area, that have been envisioned and wisely envisioned during a high growth mode when WC1 was commissioned, and also the on-hold project at Stonebrook. We don't anticipate the growth right now being projected for the need for those schools. However, should the enrollment trigger the need for those schools, they'd be put back in and just be reprioritized within the CIP. Next, new schools and reconstruction. The green band there is Newstead Elementary School, built on a property already owned by Washoe County School District on Silver Dollar Lane, which is part of a trade-up scenario I'll speak about in a moment. All the other ones are replacement, just like you did at O'Brien Middle School. These are on-site replacements of schools that are catalysts for trade-up scenarios for refreshing and trading up from small, underutilized, half-full schools that are energy inefficient to brand new state-of-the-art facilities that are scaled large enough to offer a diverse program and have the efficiencies that will redirect more operational dollars into the classrooms. The big, tall column in the middle there are the renovation, revitalization, and general maintenance. The yellow bands are your youngest schools, which we acknowledge that over a 15-year period, there will be some reinvestment. It's hard to imagine brand new schools needing it, but there will be some sort of reinvestment in those facilities as well. But the great majority of your schools will remain in use and will be supercharged with over $1 billion worth of reinvestment in those facilities. The 6 purple schools are repurposed. These are facilities that, as part of the trade-up strategy, would find a different use, and the students will not be left behind. The students will actually be rezoned to either their existing school or a neighboring school that will be rebuilt. Now, we acknowledge that over a 15-year period, and with the mandate that these trade-up scenarios came with the caveat that any sort of consolidation or closure of a facility is only in the scenario where there's a trade-up opportunity, that there's a better outcome for students. It's not just rezoning and going to another old school that's further away. This is about going to a completely renovated or rebuilt facility that might be a little bit further from home. Due to the notion of the time and commitment to doing those capital projects, and this being a 15-year program, here at the very end of 2023, we aren't going to name all of the names of the schools that are at the back end of those recommendations. We're naming groups of schools, and among them, some would be, as the next slide here conveys, some would be rebuilt, and some would be renovated, and some would be repurposed. And then we have the study and engagement column there where we have your remote schools, of which clearly in Gerlach and Natchez there would be some sort of renovation of those schools. They would be needed due to their geographic proximity, and the outcomes for the 3 schools in Incline Village yet to be determined. But among all 5 of those schools, a flagged $81 million that's place held in priority order in the schedule and reserved within the budget. And here's the slide that lists all of the schools here, and if you have interest in a particular school and what's being recommended for it, this is kind of your place to find where they fit among those different categories. But I'm going to move forward, and if we want to speak to specific schools, we always can. But this graphic here kind of correlates with the map that I showed earlier, showed where all the major investment, the size of these bars represents the dollars invested, and it's broken down by the high school feeders and where those splits between Reed and Sparks, such as Dilworth, that they would find their way into their own column. But as you can see, working from right to left, Worcester, Sparks, Reed, Sparks area, North Valleys, McLean, these are your older, more mature communities where the bulk of the investment is. However, you can see that every area, every school has some major investments. If you look at the far left, these are your newest areas or very, very small numbers of schools. Which brings us to the implementation of this program. We listened to your community, both in person when we had dozens of meetings within your communities, in your schools, talking to stakeholders, and in conducting a number of countywide surveys, one a year ago and one this fall. And we had questions in there about how we ought to prioritize and package this program in a way that's equitable and responsive to the community. And we have devised this series of FMP initiatives conforming to what we learned from the community. I'm going to speak to it here on the timeline that you can see. This is the 15-year timeline. That legacy projects, as the name implies, these are the projects you've already committed to, right? This is Debbie Smith. This is the RISE program that will be housed at the same campus as Debbie Smith, as well as the replacement of Vaughn Middle School that are already in the pipeline. Also ongoing with your capital renewal programs that are perpetual, that's assumed as well. I have $0 on here because for the FMP sake, that's already kind of accounted for somewhere else in the CIP. That's the $0. The study engagement is a modest investment in the very short term to help inform downstream decisions and capital projects that arise from it. Managed growth are the areas where we heard from the community that it's important to take care of those remaining areas of crowding that we have in the area, in specific up in the North Valleys area. Special alternative education is also lifted up and out in a high priority of your most vital programs serving the students that have the most needs. within your portfolio, and there are $42 million allocated for those programs towards the front end. That follows that study engagement period because the district they have already started a master planning process for their alternative and special education programs that will inform what those capital projects want to be. The trade-up project spans the entire 15 years. That gets into that series and cycles you might recall from the draft options, where it's rebuilding a school, vacating another one, moving in, taking that site, repurposing it for a new school, which would trigger downstream consolidations. That takes a lot of time and is a critical path of sequence of projects. So the $639 million for all of those projects spans the entire 15-year period. And then the remainder, that's that big column of all the renovations and maintenance projects. We've divided into 3 phases, kind of the schools towards the beginning, the schools in the middle, and the schools towards the end that we'll see in the next slide. Or 3 slides here that lay out kind of the timeline Gantt chart format. This starts with planning through design and through construction and closeout of the project for occupancy. And a few things I'm going to point out about the CIP, the way it is designed. First, your legacy projects continue. They're already underway, clearly. Near-term and longer-term capacity is in this managed growth band in green to the left. But you can see North Valley's High School, which is subject to a recommended addition and renovation project, which in addition to replacing the portables that are on site, it will free up space within the main building so it can be redesigned with the floor plan similar to what you have at Hug, with all of the flexible learning spaces, and to really refresh and revitalize that school while we're in there taking care of the crowding. We have Newstead Elementary built on the Silver Dollar Lane site within that early time frame as well. And it creates flexibility because we're actually building a new school. The Newstead long-term is slated for repurposing, but it can, in the interim, serve as swing space for the replacement of Lemon Valley Elementary School, also recommended in the CIP. And should the residential growth in the area tick back up quickly, you have the flexibility of an elementary school site that could be replaced as well. You see at the far right there, Cold Springs High School and Stonebrook. Those are those longer term ones that are at the very, very back end. And those can be reinsert and reprioritized if and when the triggers come for enrollment. So I'm kind of backtracking here to all those study engagements. Let me mention them to you. So we mentioned the Pre-K-8 task force, as we've referred to it. That's to study and determine whether we go with options B and C in the Pine area and C or D in the Dilworth, Sparks, and Trainer area, as well as those geographically remote studies. So that informs the special education and alternative education projects that I mentioned earlier. You can see those listed here at Turning Point. That's at the Hare Building on the other side of Reno High School. That very vital program that doesn't have its own outdoor learning area separate from the high school, and which really wants to see a lot of improvements that are listed in detail in the document. Innovations Inspire and Piccolo's Specialized Special Education Services Center also highlighted here. Among the trade-up projects, the very front end, and this is slightly different from the draft options that we presented to you last time, is we actually accelerated and named the replacement of Echo Loader Elementary School, which would enable Corbett to be vacated into that brand new facility at Loader. And Corbett, because of its strategic location immediately across the street from Wooster High School, would help facilitate that major project at Wooster. In the interim, it can be used as swing space to help facilitate that project, but also in the end state, it can be either become part of the high school or have some sort of ancillary and related program, such as a pre-K center that could be an education career tech pathway for high school students at Wooster, as an example. But we saw that strategic notion as a cause to accelerate that sequence of projects. And then the longer term trade up. These are groups of schools where we're not sure which ones, and we We could name them today. However, it'd be irresponsible to name something in 2024 that it will be 5 years to 10 years to 15 years in the future when the actual action would take place. It will clearly be a point of reassessment of the enrollment projections at the time and where the educational strategies are before determining which schools are which. This next slide here is kind of the middle of the pack. This looks at phases 1 and 2 of your prioritized improvements. We've always sorted with the high schools towards the top. So in addition to North Valley's High School, which we identified under the managed growth band, we also have Reed, Sparks High School, as well as Wooster High School that start immediately in this coming year. McQueen would be the next high school in cycle, and we acknowledge that it has a lot of priorities, including removing those portables that are out in front of the school. Then we have a series of renovation projects. Now, we started right out of the gate that we identified pilot projects at Matthews, Palmer, and Maxwell. And these are your pinwheel, pod, and sheep shed prototypes that we have. We've very intentionally included just one of each of those schools to really be studied and determine and figure out the optimal design for those schools on a little bit longer time frame so that we can have lessons learned from that, and only after those projects are complete jump into the design and implementation of packages of projects for pinwheels, sheep sheds, and pods that can be at your choosing later on, be determined to be individual projects, groups of 2, groups of 3, groups of 5, whatever most efficiently we have will work. We did engage with the AGC here in town, and they were supportive of this type of implementation. These sorts of sizes and scales of packages could be one that could be readily and efficiently staffed in a way that allows them to provide the best pricing back to WCSD. And the third slide here gets into phase 3. That's towards the very back end after 2034 timeframe, the last 5 years of the program. And these are your youngest facilities, but we continue down the way of the packages of those prototypical solutions, as well as those youngest schools that will be subject to some form of reinvestment in their building systems as they need capital renewal. So we have a couple of images here. We've studied and scaled back the renovations in a way that can be afforded to fit the objective of touching every school within a 15-year time frame. But that's to bring a lot of the amenities you have in your newest design specs, your ed specs for elementary schools at the sheep sheds, which would take advantage of those courtyard areas for outdoor learning with connectivity to flexible learning hubs like you have in your newest elementary schools, as well as bringing STEAM labs and makerspace types amenities to the schools. We also found similar sorts of solutions for pinwheels and for pods, of which we have several in your portfolio. And this last slide here, and then we'll take questions, is your timeline for this trade-up strategy. This is kind of the big, okay, where there's dramatic change in your portfolio, where we are changing a school from a middle school to an elementary school, or schools are being repurposed as the result of this trade-up strategy. These are all named here and listed here with the dates on it. And as you'll notice, those dates start as early as 2026, but that's 3 years from this calendar year that we're in today. That Pine Middle School, after the completion of the Vaughn Middle School reconstruction, could be rezoned to the new Vaughn, to Marcy Hers, a really relatively new school, as well as DePulley, the same. Complete trade up in terms of facilities and scale of programs from the existing 1970s building that Pine operates in now. Now, upon the completion of that, would enable Smithridge and Dodson to combine onto the Pine Middle School, which at the conclusion of the study for whether it's going to be a pre-K-8 or a new elementary school, would continue that trade up in 2028. I mentioned Corbett earlier, sits in the middle there at 2027. And in those cases where it has TBD, those the scenarios where there's either recommended study to determine what the scope is, or it's in that long range trade-up scenario category where that determination would be made in the future. But if you're looking for a list of where you have all those changes, trade-ups opportunities as well as repurposing, those are all listed here. So just a quick recap. That's the WCSD facility modernization plan, right? All schools within 15 years within your current budgets that you have today. Overcrowding eliminated, $140 million that can be reinvested out of spreading it around schools that are half full and concentrating them on bigger, better projects. Millions of dollars of annual savings that can be reinvested in the classrooms, as well as study of new pathways that create new access to quality programs for families and students. With that, we'll take any questions.
All right, do we have any questions for Mr. Mills? It's Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question on the Stonebrook. We were looking at a possible Stonebrook Elementary this fall, depending on numbers, because of our growth out. And that's obviously in Sparks and in my ward, so I have particular interest in it. But you got it pushed all the way out to 2039. We're at the end of looking at Cold Springs High School and Stonebrook Elementary. How have we I know we don't need it today, but I thought we'd be looking at it the next year or two, because we know the amount of houses and we're seeing what the trend is for the amount of kids going to school there. How are we pushing it that far out when our new schools that are nearby are already full and have portables? Thank you.
I'll take that one. It has a little bit more to do with our ongoing CIP, and I think it's a good opportunity to highlight the fact that this is a plan that forecasts 15 years into the future that we reevaluate at minimum annually. So in conjunction with our 5-year and our annual CIP, which we will continue to bring back annually to this committee and to the board. Since the Capital Funding Protection Committee did approve the budget for the construction of the Stonebrook Elementary School, the Board of Trustees reevaluated the need relative to the enrollment and enrollment projections at all the schools in that region and directed us to not build a new school, but rather rezone that enrollment. So based on our enrollment projections in that region, we don't anticipate the need for an additional elementary school for that amount of time. That said, this is continuously reevaluated, and should that need materialize faster than currently projected, we'll revisit it and reincorporate it into the CIP.
Can I do a follow-up? So where are you going to rezone them, and where is there room? Or will they be a long distance that they're being bused to another school that does have room? That's a huge concern, because families are not going to be okay with that.
Yeah, so the school district employs a sort of a sister committee to the Capital Funding Protection Committee called the Zoning Advisory Committee. We conducted meetings in September, October, and November, public meetings with that committee and the community, including in November at Sky Ranch Middle School, where we analyzed upwards of 8 to 10 different complex scenarios to rezone the enrollments from Bohatch and Sky Ranch into existing neighboring schools. The final recommendation from the committee was approved last Tuesday by the Board of Trustees to rezone a portion of Bohatch into Spanish Springs Elementary and a portion into Van Gorder Elementary, all of which have ample room to accept those students without overcrowding and relieves the overcrowding at Bohatch for many years to come, as well as rezoning a portion of the Sky Ranch middle school students into Mendive. I'd be happy to, share links with the committee afterwards, but these decisions are not made lightly, but they were made very, in partnership with the public and kind of in the best interest of everyone involved.
Okay, so rezoning would occur for next school year?
Thank you. Great clarification. Yes, the action was to be effective the 24-25 school year.
Reese?
Mr. Solero, thank you so much. I have a number of questions, so bear with me. They don't go in any particular order. I wanted to start off by thanking Canon Design for the work that's been put in. It's obvious that the work has been iterative and comprehensive, so thank you for that. I also think, and Mr. Searcy, you mentioned earlier, the importance of the flexibility of the plan. And this is something that is important to me because, you know, I sit in a different role and a cheap seat up here where I get lots of things to ask questions about, some of which are related to parts of town that I have a particularized interest in, others related to general statements about what my hope is for the school district. But all of those are not, I think, as fully informed as Canon Designs or yours, Mr. Searcy. So please bear with me as I have some questions. The first is really about McQueen High School, the best high school in northern Nevada, where I attended school and my children also attended school. A little bias for the Lancer Pride. But I guess I see it as being in your timeline as being out in 2027. And I had hoped, of course, based on what I understand to be the conditions on the ground there, that it would be much sooner in the planning process. So what is the criteria under which a school is evaluated to be therefore placed in line? I mean, obviously there are many deserving schools. We want all our kids to have great school experiences, and whether we're we're pitching something that is important to us in our heart, what we want is for equity across our school and all of our levels, elementary, middle school, high school. And so how do you prioritize one school over the other? How was it done?
It's a great question. It's data informed, but also brings in wisdom of educational strategies as well as the practicality and critical paths of getting projects done. We actually also used survey results from the community to help inform some of the weighting of the data that we use to inform the sequence of the projects. But as part of our work was to do a benchmarking study of all the schools. And I'm trying to remember which month we presented some of the findings to you, but with the green, yellow, red
Yes, and
outcomes.
we had like holes in walls and different kinds of things. I totally remember.
Exactly. So it was roughly 70% of the weight came from the results of the facility study that we did. That weight wasn't arbitrary. We actually used the survey questions where we asked that relative to another question about serving students with the most barriers to education, which was a little bit lower in the weighting, around 30%, but we factored that in as well. So when all those were factored in, it gave us a kind of a way to index and benchmark the schools. However, I don't like to use the term data-driven, which informs that there's an algorithm that does all the work. There's actual human wisdom and intervention on there, so it's data-informed. So we took into consideration how to implement projects, how to support educational initiatives. The notion of doing these trade-up scenarios had a critical path that really wanted to span the entire time frame. As well as looking at the optics of where the money's being spent, so we're not spending it all on the front end in one area and not towards the completely absent on the back end. So there's a bit of a lot of calculus that went into it. So it's not the simple way to say, here, look at this math problem, here's the formula. But I will say that it was done with the eye for equity across the county, and we looked at cash flow as well. While with WC1 you have a great number of resources that come in the door each and every year, that we can't do 15 years worth of work all in the first year. So there will be some schools that are second, third, fourth, et cetera.
Well, for my part, and so that I can close out this particular question or line of questions, I have spent the better part of 10 years coaching at McQueen High School as a volunteer debate coach. So I'm in the building. I've seen some of the repairs that have been done, and quite frankly, those have been necessary, including flooring, some different kind of HVAC work. But I will say the portables continue to be a significant problem at that school.
Yes.
It is something that I think none of us can really be proud of, and so it's hard to see brand new schools and other schools being remodeled while they have some what I would consider not ideal conditions, including in their science facilities, which are not particularly modern when you compare them to some of the other ones, as well as their art and sort of art areas of the school. So my pitch is just to say that as Canon evaluates and as the school district looks at it on an annual basis, consider that in your thought process, and certainly let me know if there's anything I can do to help. The second thing I wanted to raise is I did not see, and I continue not to see, very much emphasis placed on administrative facilities. I am someone who believes that these administrative facilities that we're currently in tonight are not doing right by our administrative staff and the professionals who use these buildings. And so what is the plan, as I've asked before, for improved access to administrative facilities for our school district?
I'll take that one. Adam Searcy for the record. The replacement of the school district administrative facility was included in the last year's 5-year CIP. It's excluded from this scope.
I see.
You will see it again in coming months as in the next iteration of the 5-year CIP. And it, I think, is a good opportunity to mention. Paul kind of sped through the conversation around these repurposed facilities. There's a number of them that were identified. They're termed repurposed for a reason. While that might mean closure to many who have lived and participated in elementary school for generations there, they're perfectly good buildings, and they can and are intended to be repurposed literally into highest and best use. And whether that's the satellite office of the school district police department, there is a responsible remodel budget in the recommended FMP for that repurposing, or it could be some strategic partnership with a member agency, to form a pre-K center or a senior center, you name it. Those are to be determined, but they're really tremendous opportunities to serve the needs of our community and perhaps the administrative office needs of the district. But there is and will continue to be a very significant element of the CIP, which is separate and in addition to this facility modernization plan scope, that we're going to bring back to the committee and execute in the immediate years.
Well, and part of my inquiry was because at this body we have often talked about whether or not we would combine elements of administrative facility with a school site. I think there was originally some talk of that at the Debbie Smith site. And so just, again, a good question, in part because, for example, this room can be very small, and for the needs of our community who comes here to engage in the democratic process, I think we can do better. So thank you for that. And Mr. Schlero, I have about 3 more questions. Would you like me to continue? Absolutely. Okay, thank you so much. What about, so when we were originally designing and the beautiful construction that has now occurred at Hug High School, one of the original plans called for the building of a swimming pool there. And it was, a dream, right? It was an expensive dream at times. And so has there been any discussion about whether or not any of the school sites would include a swimming pool facility? It feels like even though that we are under construction for the Moana Springs Aquatic Center, we're still a number of pools short in this community. And in my mind, having a pool at a high school especially would be particularly relevant and helpful, whether that's in Cold Springs or at the newly rebuilt Wooster. It just seems we're missing an opportunity to do something both for our students and the community that could be a win-win. So is this something that has just decidedly fallen off or not within the purview? Could it be studied?
The specific scopes of these renovation projects isn't defined.
Okay.
There are ample budgets, particularly at the high schools, dozens, in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars that are allocated in the CIP or in the FMP for these high school renovations, which could manifest themselves in whatever way going through a design process. It could wind up being, if there's a high priority for aquatics, whether it's regional and can serve several schools, et cetera, that could be. It's just not determined and defined yet in the
Well, we have
FMP.
some experience with that, right? We have regional facilities that are larger football fields or soccer fields that are intended to host regional events. We have done that, but my plea to you is that we include that concept as we move forward, because I think our school board trustees and our sister agencies who sit on this dais would be happy to collaborate if there are a way to do it where we have the opportunity to provide for more aquatics in this region. It's absolutely devastatingly, painfully clear that we do not have enough swimming pools. And we have kids who are diving and they're doing swim team and they are making do wherever they can. I look at Reno High and Galena specifically, who I know have excellent swim programs, and they're finding pool time wherever they can. So again, an important component of my ask. I wanted to ask about maybe tolls specifically, but more a general question about these sheep sheds, pods, and pinwheels, because I see those as interesting fixes for especially elementary schools, which is where I think all of them ended up being. Why tolls is not eligible for any of those? Because it's not on any of the lists that you've identified, but is it because tolls is so old that it just needs to be scraped to the earth and redone? What was the thinking there as to why they were not eligible for some of those, what I'll call remodels?
We identified within the Clayton feeder pattern, of which tolls is one of 4 schools, that there would be 2 reconstructions and 2 repurposes. Now, we identified tolls specifically because of its strategic location adjacent to Clayton Middle School, with the community assets that are there with, I believe they have a pool, et cetera, that we went ahead and named that as one of the keepers. Right, so it would be actually subject to a complete rework, reconstruction of that campus, which would facilitate a long-term trade-up scenario within that area.
Well, it looks like Clayton is part of that overall plan because you have it designed in the both projects. I suppose, of course, I'll make a pitch to say that those tennis courts need lots of help. They have not been functional in 20 years since I went there. So another great school, Clayton Cubs. Let me ask about, and then I think I've only got 2 more questions. The question next really is an overlapping question related to our public lands bill that is something politically is happening in our region. In the public lands bill, I think there have been a number of jurisdictional asks that impact the school district. Either they are asked for lands that would be used for sites for future elementary schools. I know that one in the North Valleys in particular, Mr. Searcy, you and I have had conversations going back as far as 5 or 6 years. And then even on, and I'm not sort of asking your position on the public lands bill, I understand it's being introduced in Congress perhaps later this week. But my question is, there are other areas of town where I believe fundamentally, as we have approved projects in them, that there are land dedications that are intended to benefit the school district. And so Verdi, for example, the Sonterra project that exists up above Verdi Mogul, or the Talus Valley project has a number of different school sites in it. I don't see any of those contemplated in this particular plan, meaning is it that they're so far out and far removed from what we're doing that they have not been contemplated, or is it that when they get built, maybe we'll talk about them? Does it make sense what I'm asking? I'll give you an example very specifically. Verdi Elementary School is a cute school, cute as a button, great families out there. It is really almost not functional, I don't think, other than the fact that we've got very little humans attending there. But it's a cute school, but I presume that at some point in time, the Verdi Mogul area will either need Verdi, and I see Verdi in the plan here for some refresh. But when you have Verdi and then you have across the freeway another school site, I'm trying to understand how do we contemplate those things within the plan, or is that more about the prospective iterations of the plan?
If I could, simplistically to answer your question, and I appreciate you highlighting that, there are parcels that the school district owns, not dissimilar to the Stonebrook parcel. There's multitudes of them that are either owned outright or under some form of MOU for future when and if needed acquisition. All of that work is essentially in addition to this FMP within our overall CIP. Now, should the need arise more swiftly than anticipated currently for one of that growth relief or that growth, we would meet that need in a timely fashion. It may cause us to delay some of these other improvements, but it's not shown explicitly here because this is just narrowly focused on improving all of our existing schools, but it's absolutely on our radar continuously.
Any other questions? Mr. Diss.
Let's talk about Pine. So you have it listed here to
possibly rezone to DePauli, Hearst, Vaughn. Pine is, I'd say, located in an economically disadvantaged area, part of town, a lot of low-income families that might face hurdles in transporting their children to a school that's farther away than where Pine is currently located, close to their new house. What kind of thought and discussion went on when considering these lower income schools and the burden it might place on families when it comes to shipping them to a new school, busing them? Just talk me through the process.
Your scenario about access in close proximity in a low socioeconomic area was one of the major considerations for option C in that area, in which it would actually be rebuilt as a pre-K through 8 program, sized in the realm of 900 or so students that would accommodate the immediate area. Just like right now, some families enjoy the older siblings being able to drop off their kids at Smith Ridge before going to Pine. They would be actually all on one campus. It would be designed in a way with the appropriate separation of the different age groups. But that was one of those scenarios that we're recommending to study and determine if the district is ready to go a little bit outside of where they normally operate with one sole school right now, which is a language program in the pre-K-8 space. It's just one that we need it to go beyond just facilities driving it. It needs to be an educational mission for it. But the other option would involve different transportation setups where there would be increased transportation for your middle school age students, but they would all be trading up to larger, better equipped and newer facilities at HERS, DePauli, and the new Vaughn.
And then I had the chance a couple days ago, we went and visited the Communities and Schools site over at Bernice Matthews, and they also have a Head Start program over there that's located in a portable that's not connected to the school. Has there been thought about providing space at new builds for these organizations like CIS that provide wraparound services for these families? Because I know that there's a lot of principals who would like to have their presence in their schools, but there's just not space for them because they're an old school and they need it for classrooms. Communities and Schools at Vaughn originally started in the boiler room, but there was such a need that they were willing to put up with those conditions where they're just like sweating their face off in the middle of January in the boiler room because that school needed it.
Kind of back to the earlier question about aquatics and stuff, we didn't get into all the specifics of design. However, these projects are amply budgeted to where they could accommodate moving closer towards the new ed specs that you have when you're designing new schools, which have family resource centers and all these sorts of amenities and spaces bespoke within those designs.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask a related question? I just didn't want to move on from Pine since Mr. Diss was so kind enough to bring it up. You know, Pine, also a school I attended, go Patriots. On the back side of Pine, of course, is it Jamaica Park? I never understood why we have that name for that park, but there's a large park with related ball fields. I often wondered why we are not doing what we did at O'Brien, where we have rebuilt the school adjacent to it, meaning is there a way for us to partner as owners of the park, let you build the school on this site, which has got great access, obviously, to McCarran, and then it might be a pre-K through 8, whatever you're saying there. I just don't know how you rebuild on that same site unless you move over to the park as your building site and then remove and place a park. And then I suppose Smith Ridge becomes one of these repurposed facilities. But another school I went to, and I moved around a bit.
You've been to all of
so again, this is my point to you is to remark that you have partners in the cities and the county that would love to help you facilitate what you want to accomplish in benefiting our students. And if that means we had a park that was gone for a year and a half or so while we built there and moved over, this is always something to be discussed or worth pursuing.
If I could just respond to that, I first of all really appreciate that, and I think everybody can connect the dots and see how these rabbit holes go. You know, exactly how we build a new Vaughn, vacate Pine, and then reimagine what that campus can be. this is an opportunity for me to emphasize, Paul kind of touched on it, glossed over, the fact that all of our current processes will be implemented on all of these projects, whether it's an annual CIP review or whether it's basic design phase funding approval at Capital Funding Protection Committee, whether it's rezoning that will inevitably ensue when many of these schools, the processes, the approvals, the independent committees, the public community engagement, that's how the sausage will be made. This is still 30,000 foot level, but each and every one of these projects creates tremendous opportunities that are only magnified with the types of community partnerships that you described. So thank you.
Mr. Ivory.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry for my tardiness today. First of all, I couldn't be more excited about this program, and the way you've laid it out strategically is really quite fascinating, actually. I mean, that, like Adam says, every time you make a change, a domino falls, right? And now you've got other issues to work with. So I appreciate the process that goes in. Mine is more of a logistics question for Adam, perhaps. And I know I'm looking at the timeline sheet. And I know I can't just be like, okay, straight line, but it looks to me like with the 2 legacy projects that we've got in the works, and in the first 5 years of the program, we're going to be spending close to maybe $1 billion in the first 5 years. Is that sound correct?
Not quite that high, but it is a little more front-loaded than back-loaded. And we had conversations with CFO about cash flowing this, and we had to lay this out in a way, and we feel confident based on that interaction that this is deliverable.
So deliverable as far as,
or feasible, I should say.
yeah, based upon the money we have coming in through our funding mechanisms and stuff. So my next question to Adam is, where are we at on staffing for this? Because, it's like the thing everybody says all the time is, oh, we're going to build another school. Where are we going to find the teachers to fill that school? Where are we going to find the people? We can't hire. I can't imagine that we're looking at hiring consultants to help us get through the management of this when we're looking at a program of spending $2 billion over a 15-year time period. And then I'm not positive, but I'm going to go out there on a limb and say, when we're done with that 15-year process, we're going to turn around and spend $2 billion on the next 15-year project. So my question becomes, where are we at with staffing? What are our goals, and what are our plans for bringing in enough people to manage all this work?
So just to be clear, school district, like teachers and whatnot, there's not additional schools proposed here. We'll actually be consolidating. So from that standpoint, while we always need as many talented staff in the schools, this will actually help the current staffing levels. We rely heavily, as you all know well, on industry partners. So we have several in the audience here with us today who are going to be important teammates going forward in delivering these complicated projects. That said, when we start to talk about the kind of dollar figures that today's construction really costs, they're larger numbers than ever. But the scope and the details of these projects are not beyond the capabilities of our current team. We will continue to engage partners, whether they're architects or construction management consultants or whatever might be needed to temporarily augment our resources. But not only do we believe we have the financial resources to deliver this, but we believe that we have the staffing and industry partnership resources in this community to deliver on this program. It's fuzzy, it's a 30,000 foot level plan, but we're going to dive in and roll up our sleeves, and this is not an unattainable scope of work.
So we're not actually looking at adding more staff to the capital, and so we're clear, I didn't want to misconstrue this. I'm not talking about adding more teachers. I get the fact they've got their heavy lift over there on that end. This is capital improvement. What I'm talking about is the staff in the capital improvement staff that's all here tonight, that's all nodding their heads going, yes, we've got a heavy lift here. And I guess what I'm saying, Adam, is, and I know we've had these conversations, but in my opinion, like previously with the funding mechanisms that we've had for schools, it's been boom and bust, right? All of a sudden, oh, we got some bonding money that freed up. Okay, we're going to build a bunch of stuff, and then we're not going to have anything. That's not where we're at now. We've got a pretty good funding mechanism coming up. So I guess my question is, at what point are we going to, and what are the plans perhaps of how we're going to get to a staff that can maintain and keep up with this kind of construction?
You know, I will say that Tammy Zimmerman and the team have done some recent internal analysis of some reorganization, project management office, so to speak, to really manage the entirety of the program while allowing specific members of the team to focus on design and construction phases of the project has been considered. That's not a significant addition, maybe a couple of additional positions. I think, you know, commensurate with the degree of specificity of this plan, we feel we do have the team, again, in tremendous partnership with a variety of consultants and contractors. These will be complicated, more technically difficult projects to execute than, you know, a greenfield new elementary school. But we're going to step through it as we always have with the tremendous team that we have in place, maybe a few adjustments, but we do not have an accompanying proposal to add, you know, handfuls of permanent staff to the capital projects department at this time.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I just want to throw a couple things out, not questions. I sat as a steering committee member for this group over the, I don't know, year plus process, it seemed. And, you know, just the data that this group put together, the surveys, the input from the community, I think is to be commended. And, you know, we should really understand that, you know, Mr. Mills made this seem like it's pretty simple and pretty easy, and here's this thing, and oh, by the way, here's your, you know, here's your marching orders. But I think, you know, the technical ability of their group to put this together and work with our community on some really difficult discussions is to be commended. So I wanted to throw that out there. The process was fantastic. It is a hard subject. It's not easy. I think there's probably, you know, even as the capital team starts to put things into play, some of those conversations are going to come back up. There's the data there to support it. So at least that piece is good. So really appreciate the work that you all did for this. Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
I'd just like to add thank you for incredible this whole presentation and the work that you've done. I love it because it's really outside the box of anything we've ever done before, and really reimagining reutilization of schools, repurposing, kind of every piece of this kind of gives us you know, it's different pieces of the puzzle we're putting together differently, not just continuing build another school, build another school, build another school. What's happening not only to the older ones, but utilization of those and efficiencies that we really need, that I think, and the ability to use it for other things, whether it's for the school district or community group, you know, whether it's for, you know, Communities in Schools, who's an amazing partner, Boys and Girls Club, Children's Cabinet. I mean, we could just start naming all the different agencies that fit right into support for kids, for education, and for families. Gives us a lot of additional options. So really appreciate the options that are here, and kind of as we move forward, you know, seeing what is going to work best. But incredible amount of data and time and input from your group, the group that has done this. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Andrew.
As you know, a very new member to this group, but certainly not new to the community, I think the celebration of WC1 needs to really also be the focus, because I don't think we could even be here without WC1. This project couldn't even happen without WC1. And to know that you're able to plan and project out that far and then use, as Mr. Solero stated, in terms of data points and projections of growth and what that looks like in our community, but to have a sustainable piece in place that allows consistency in terms of the bust and growth that we've seen, that Mr. Ivory shared, I think is really a celebration to those that worked really hard on that. So I just don't want to lose sight of what this is all about, really. So maybe it's because I'm so new that I feel like WC1 is one to be celebrated. But since I have the floor, I will echo Councilwoman Bybee on the Stonegate. When Mr. Slater looked at me, I think he thought I was going to say a question. I guess it's more of a statement. I think every school is important. But I do think, and I don't know when you answered Councilman Reese's question in terms of the matrix that you used, but sometimes it makes me wonder, as you were going through a very well put together presentation, that's a lot to share in a succinct way. So thank you for that. But the overpopulation or having a school that is definitely, we all know the history of various schools that really, how they were running, it's surprising that they all got through, but they did. But there's also an academic component. And I think Mr. Dis explained the Pine Middle School as an example in terms of just the socioeconomic location of that particular school. And so overcrowding, and I'm not picking on schools because I know McQueen was already stated as number one, so I'm not wanting to be competitive here. But, a school, in Galena, for instance, versus, looking at a school in another location, economic and that socioeconomic, that overcrowding, I think there's an academic correlation that may be also a data point that I was curious if you use that, because overcrowding in, for instance, a Galena versus another socioeconomic area that maybe doesn't have the same status, I wonder if that also is given in terms of the priority. Because really, when it comes down to this, it's about children being able to be successful and graduate. I mean, really, when you step back, all of this is about that. And so I think that is a data point that, may or may not have a place in the analysis, but I think at least warrants me bringing it up. And then don't forget about Stonegate, because I hope that even though we look at it a year from now, or look at everything, sometimes, as you know, construction projects, you look at the growth and then you're catching up. So I hope that we're not in that position, because 2039 is a long time. I don't even know if I'm going to be here in 2039. I didn't want to add, I will? Okay. I was a little concerned about, whether I'll get to see Stonebrook, but since it's in my area as well, I share Sparks as well. So I do want to thank everybody and the staff and all of the hard work. I think that we need to, acknowledge that as well. So thank you.
If I could address your question or your statement, you pointed at a fundamental aspect of doing portfolio planning like this, looking at the capacity and utilization of the spaces and assets that you have is fundamental to this work. We looked at groups of schools as well as individual schools. Where we have at our disposal opportunities for rezoning, which is a no-cost solution, which is great. It means, just like Stonebrook, at the end of the day, by delaying that project, it enables so many other projects to move forward because you're not concentrating in a brand new school where you can solve it with a policy decision. Where we had managed growth focuses towards the very front, and that metric was in place, like it jumped the line to make sure that North Valleys was taken care of, because there is no rezoning out of that problem. Now, Debbie Smith will help a little bit. However, the projected enrollment in that school, while dipping a little bit in the near term, picks back up. It's just not at the clip that it was when WC1 was envisioned originally, where there would be a new high school in the Cold Springs area. And we've been very consistent and intentional about stating how that high school is still the plan. It's just not yet.
Thank you.
All right, not seeing any other, Mr. Martinez.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair, and excuse my tardiness as well for the beginning of the meeting.
Just have to clean the bathroom.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Cersei, and the Canon Design Group for all the work that you've done to get us to this place. I also want to commend all of our community members who ended up voting for WC1 to pass and just allowing us the opportunity to be here to, speak about all these opportunities to increase the educational opportunities for our community members. And so as we go through the process, I just want to make sure that we keep that in mind and that we engage with our community and get that feedback from them throughout the process. And I know those things are already placed, and so I just want to commend the school district for also increasing language access and making some of those surveys in English and Spanish. And I know I took one of them in Spanish just to see kind of what it looked like, and it definitely provided the same access, whether you were a Spanish speaker or an English speaker, to provide your input in that. And so I appreciate that opportunity for folks to be able to do that. And I know we're not part of the rezoning committee, but I also want to echo some of the comments made by Councilwoman Bybee about the distance for our elementary school and middle school students to travel to other places, and high school students that may not be able to have transportation, especially at Pine Middle School, who may have to go to Hearst or DePoli and may not have the opportunities to stay for those after school activities, whether it's a parent not being able to pick them up and them having to leave school and ride the bus to get home. And so just being considerate of those things as we move forward. And again, as I said, I know we're not part of that zoning committee, but I want to make sure I put that out there as we move forward in these processes. So again, thank you all. Thanks to the staff for the work that you've done as well. And I look forward to continuing to engage in this process. Thanks again.
All right. Since this is an action item, I'm going to go ahead and call for public comment, if we've got any public comment on this item.
Pablo Navarron.
Hello, my name is Pablo Duran. I currently live in Newark area. I'm a Galena High School graduate and also a Pine Middle School alumni. So very sad to see of Pine's closing. Say goodbye to Pine, and then I know you're not. I know you're a capital funding community, protection community, not a zoning advice community or naming advice community. So I got a lot of questions. So number one. When you close the pond or repurpose it to elementary school or pre-K to 8 school, you guys gave it opportunity to give the community to name of like pre-K to 8 school, like maybe name of a school, give it of a nearby community, because our people, we don't live a community when Pine Middle School was built, but we moved there during the 1990s. To current that date. So, and number two, I thank you, Danny, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Miguel Martinez, that have an opportunity about my neighborhoods. Of course, with Pine Middle School, because Pine Middle School located in disadvantaged student. I live close to Pine Middle School, and I heard they might rezone to Hearst and Galena, because I'm one of those students who went on bus to Galena High School every single day for 4 years. And Adam Cisu told me that they're being rezoned to Damari Ranch High School because there are so for Damari Ranch High School. So you're not. I know you guys not part of zoning advice community, but I feel like the best solution, if you wanna to increase the penetration rate for the Newark area. So let's rezone to the new Vaughn Middle School or the newly rebuilt new Worcester High School, either the current campus or a Hidden Valley one. But the problem is the game rival over there, because of rezone of Vaughn and Worcester, they have a game conference over there. So if you want to rezone that, I think about higher increase of school police union board trustee. So this is not a easy solution, but But if you want to read some to Hearst or DePaul, this is not easy decision. That the middle school used to have like the pitching and have the school board sports at Pine Middle School and after school club, very good activity after school at Pine. So I feel like this is not having same opportunity as they're going to Hearst or Hearst Galeno or DePaul or the Monties. So that's an accurate issue for them. So this is not easy solution. So, and also plus, what to do with the Hidden Valley when option B or C, because their woman is very low. So I want to touch on that. And also last question about the Dover, Sparks, and Trainer. I do support option C and D. I do support rebuilding of Spark Middle School. So there you go. Go Golden Bear. So there you go. So I do support the study option for PK to ACE school choice. So there we go. So
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item?
There's no more public comment.
All right, we'll bring that back to the board, and I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I recommend approval of the draft final district-wide facility modernization plan by the Board of Trustees.
I'll
I'll
second that
second.
motion.
Got a
We're at a tie.
motion by Reese, a second by Bybee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Congratulations. Thank you very much. All right, that'll take us on to item 2.03, which is a presentation, discussion, and possible action to approve the 2023 Annual Accountability Report. Ms. Golden's going to take us on this one.
I'll just introduce this briefly. This is a requirement of the Board Policy 9405, which guides this committee. We've presented a similar form and fashion in years past. This item is for action. And I'll turn the floor over to our Director of Design and Planning, Teresa Polson.
Thank you, Adam. I'm going to try something new and stand tonight. We'll see how it goes. After sitting so long. As Adam mentioned, thank you very much for being here. But as Adam mentioned, this is a board policy that we come to this committee to do our report every year, but we do also like to highlight our accomplishments that our capital improvement program and staff have done. Slide, please. Okay, thank you. Wanted to start out by pointing out our data gallery website, where you can find quite a bit of information in regards to our capital improvement program. But specifically today, we'll talk about the capital renewal program. We'll touch on our energy efficiency and our major projects, which are located under the Building Home tab on that data gallery page. So in regards to capital renewal, that slide, or excuse me, that web page has a ton of information in regards to our future maintenance projects at any particular site. So you can go onto that site, select any school or even a non-education school, and find out what the future maintenance needs are. It'll show the scope and the cost for those projects. In addition, our purchasing department does also post our construction bidding results for the previous projects that have been bid at, again, any location that you can select on that website. I'd like to talk about our project prioritization and how we come about our capital renewal list every year. We do have assessment staff that go out to all the sites every year. They inspect carpet, concrete, railings, roofing, everything you can think of. They assess those on all the buildings, and they put that information into our facility condition index software, which helps create that priority for all of our projects every year. We take that information, and then we also meet with our maintenance staff and get input from them. And we put pricing to all of those projects. That includes design and permits and all those other associated fees with the projects. And that's how we create our capital renewal list that we then come to you and ask for the money for the following year to take care of those projects. So this is our list of allocations and investments for our capital renewal program. This is money that has been allocated and money spent since the passing of WC1 back in 2016. We have spent now more than $245 million on those projects. I just wanted to point out that all of the projects for all of those allocations through 21 are 100% complete. We do have a few projects that we're still working on in the FY22 program and the FY23. You'll notice that there is a little bit of money still sitting in all of those allocations, and that money that's sitting there really is due to projects that have either come in over or under budget, or it's program administration money that's still sitting in those allocations. Program administration is for salaries, it's for everything else, your overhead, if you will, supplies, software, et cetera, for the capital projects bond program. Next slide, thank you. Just a little bit more detail about the FY23 projects specifically. We do have approximately 104 projects in that program. 63% of those are complete, 19% are in construction, and 18% are in design. This is just a snapshot of our Building Home webpage. On this page, it gives us information about our major projects that are currently going on. Our major projects we define as either new schools or expansions. Communication does quarterly reports for us for those major projects, which is very helpful. Get a snapshot of the status of those projects at any time. This page also has information in regards to zoning, school naming. It has information about this committee, its role and function within our program, and lots of information about the facility master plan report that you just heard about. This is our list of major projects. Again, since the passing of WC1, as you can see, we have almost approached $1 billion mark in total invested funds for these projects. It shows the status of all of those. Currently, we have 3 listed that are still in progress. The facility modernization plan is one of those. And then, of course, we're still working on bond and transportation, which you'll hear about here shortly. So for the FY23 program, the change orders that we saw for our capital renewal projects were at 4.2%. All of these change orders are based on the POs that were closed in FY23. For major projects, the change orders are currently at 6.1% for FY23. Wanted to talk a little bit about that number because we were a little bit taken aback because it was a little bit higher than last year's, as you can see. There's a couple of reasons for that. In the FY23, we closed POs for 2 major projects that were actually CMAR projects. And the POs that were closed were, see if I can talk through this. They were POs that were closed that were part of a multi-phase, multi-year project. So it kind of skewed the percentage numbers a little bit as far as the FY23 program. And in addition to that, and probably more importantly, those change orders include the contractor CMAR change orders also, which really is not a true sort of owner change order. So I hope that kind of makes sense. But we'll be looking at that and taking that information out of the report for next year. So is there any questions on that? That makes sense. Energy efficiency, our website here has really great information in regards to our utilities. Again, at all of our sites, you can select any school, you can select the admin building, you can see how much energy we're using, both in terms of use and cost. And it also gives us great information in regards to monitoring, data analytics. It helps us identify problems if we're seeing high energy use at any particular site or water leaking, we can identify those. And so we turn those into projects. We do allocate about $1 million a year for towards these energy efficiency projects. So in conclusion, we have spent over $25 million out of our approved $40 million FY23 program for capital renewal and over $160 million of investments toward our major projects program. However, it is not in FY23. That is since inception of the WC1. So apologize for that mistake. This presentation is for action today, and that concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Ms. Polson? Mr. Ivory.
Thank you. So on the energy efficiency, do we have any kind of numbers? I know you guys are big on crunching numbers all the time. So do we have any kind of numbers at all as to like per year moving forward with the efficiency standards and stuff that we're meeting on these schools? How much are we saving the general fund?
I don't have that answer for you today, but I certainly can follow up with you. I know we have a ton of information in regards, not only on the website specifically, you can see savings at each school, but in terms of the overall program, I don't have that number, but I can certainly follow
Yeah,
up.
I'd be curious
with
as
you.
to, I'm sure it's getting bigger and bigger every year,
Yeah.
but,
I would think,
yeah.
based
perfect.
on the investment that we're making.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this item? It is an action item, so I'll go ahead and take public comment if we have any public comment on this item.
There's no public comment.
All right, thank you very much. Bring it back to the board. I would entertain a motion.
I was going to I'll second.
All right. Motion by Reese, second by Andriola. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right. That takes us on to item 2.04, which is a presentation and discussion to update this committee on the E. Otis Vaughn rebuild construction phase budget. Ms. Polson.
Thank you. So, yeah, this is really cool. This is actually our very first project as a direct result of the FMP, right? First core school project, so this is pretty exciting. So starting with background again, you already heard Paul just talk quite a bit about the facility modernization plan, and it was identified pretty quickly on that Vaughn Middle School was selected as the first school that would receive a full rebuild at that site, not only due to age, but educational adequacy isn't great at that school as well. So we're really excited to get the design started and going in December of 2022. We retained TSK Architecture for the project for design and Clark & Sullivan as the construction manager at risk. We have done a lot of work over the past few months, and we'll be culminating design here within the next 30 days. So we started, of course, meeting with the staff and doing programming with the Vaughn staff, and identified, some unique characteristics of that school. They have an international baccalaureate program there, as well as a deaf, hard, and hearing program that we've been really sensitive to design around. The building at this site is the prototype of O'Brien. However, we've moved some parts and pieces around. It is a site adapt design. Part of the reason we had to move things around quite a bit is because the size of this site is very small. It's like 9.3 acres, and most of our sites are about double that size for a middle school. So it was been a pretty good challenge fitting everything on site. So it is a 1,200 student capacity, which is the same as O'Brien. We've done quite a bit of coordination with the city of Reno during our administrative review. We have agreed to a number of significant off-site improvements for pedestrian and vehicular safety around the school. And this is also a joint use park with the city of Reno, and it will continue to be so when the school is done. So just a little bit about the site and the phasing. So looking at this plan, the existing fields are on the Vassar side of the street right now. And so just like O'Brien, we do propose to build the new school on, in an L shape on Vassar and Yorrie, with Yorrie being the new school entrance to the school. And then on Bresson's side, where you see the fields, that's where the existing building is. So phase 2 will be to go in, demolish the existing building, and then rebuild those fields on the back side. This is a site circulation plan of the vehicular circulation. This is what it'll look like when the school is completed. You'll see the red dash line on the right hand or the east side of the site. That is intended to be the bus drop-off. The buses will enter on Bresson. They'll exit on Vassar. The red dash line you see at the bottom there is really intended only for the special education buses to take that route and exit on Yorrie. The top dash blue line is the student parent student parent drop off. They will enter on Yorrie. They have a pretty good sized queuing line there and will exit on Bresson. Currently there is no on-site student drop off for that school, so we tried really hard to make sure that that was accommodated. And then on the southwest sort of area where you see the blue and the red dashed area, that's a public parking lot basically for public to come in to park, and then they can enter the school on that Yorrie side. Just some noted changes and or improvements that I wanted to highlight that we're doing here that we did not include at Vaughn. Well, first of all, the square footage, let's address that. The school is about 12,000 square feet larger than O'Brien. And the main reason for that is because of the building blocks that we had to kind of move the building around and rearrange it. We had to add some circulation corridors that were necessary. We also increased the width of some of those main corridors in the school. We had some complaints from O'Brien's staff that it was just very tight in between school passings, that it got real tight for the students to pass, so we did widen some corridors. And then we ended up with a second floor mezzanine at the media center, which is kind of ended up being a bonus space for us that can be used for any kinds of classes or pull out education, whatever it may be. But it did add a little bit to the square footage, but we consider that a pretty good bonus. Renewables, we were not able to do a geothermal field at this site, again, because the size of the site, we just couldn't accommodate it, so we did want to include some sort of a renewable. So we are planning on solar on the roof at this school. We are including 2 shade structures, interior wall protection on some of the main corridors, and interior wayfinding. These are items that were not included. Some of these newer schools, and there's been a lot of comments, and that it would be of great benefit. Interior wayfinding, especially the bigger these schools get, we're finding that we need to make sure we get some good wayfinding. A couple more items that I forgot to list on here is the cell tower. We have a giant cell tower in the middle of our school field right now, so that will need to be relocated as part of this project. It will stay on site, but be moved. And then, as I did mention earlier, the significant number of off-site improvements that we'll be making as well. So our construction phase estimates for this project currently are $120 million to $125 million. That is based on a $109 million construction estimate that was received from Clark & Sullivan for the construction. It also does include professional services and FF&E. Just as a general information, the breakdown on that construction number is phase 1 is approximately $100 million, and then phase 2 for the fields is the $9 million that you see there. Our schedule, as I stated earlier, will be completing design within about 30 days. We are heading in for permitting immediately thereafter. Bidding, we intend on starting in March. That is, of course, with your consent of this committee in February 1st. Rolling into construction in June, having the school open in August of '26, and then we would go in and demo that old school and construct the fields and be complete spring of '27. Our next steps are to come back to this committee in February for our GMP1 phasing construction request for funding. And then we would come back in probably late '25 for our GMP2 construction funding for that portion of the work. This is an informational only presentation. And that's it. Do you have any questions?
All right, Mr. Dis.
Thank you for that, Ms. Paulson. 1,200 student capacity. How many students currently go to Vaughn?
There are, hold on, I have that here. I think it's 571.
Okay. And then currently there's a food pantry at
Yes.
Vaughn that services families there, and also from Libby Booth in the area. Has space for that been accounted in this new design?
Yes, it is, and a better space.
Good.
More
Excellent.
improved space, I should say. Yeah.
Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I'm looking at your construction phase estimates, 56% increase from O'Brien that we just built. Is this strictly inflation? Because
Well-
every item on it is higher, and I know that as a city, inflation is what killed our budget this year. So
Right.
we're all dealing with inflation. I know Debbie Smith, we had a year delay because of inflation. Is this just inflation, or what else is contributing? That's
Yeah.
huge.
So it is huge, and yeah, it's kind of shocking number. It's not just inflation. If you know, I know it just got completed, but it was bid back in 2020. So you know, when we did our initial estimates for that project, I sort of calculated about 10% a year for escalation. So if you do that, using escalation about 10% a year, and then you add, of course, the additional square footage that we talked about, that's a significant number. It's about 12,000 square feet, and that equates to about $6 million. So you add that on, it gets pretty close to that $109 million number. Plus the other little additional items that we spoke of earlier, too. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ivory.
I gotta agree. I think on the $109 million is, you know, remember when we used to build these things for 70 and thought that
Right.
was high. Is a 56% increase. I know logistically there's all sorts of stuff that the contractors are going to have to deal with. The number that I'm really struggling with here is, why is the design, the professional services, why is it double? We're not talking about a 56% increase. We're talking over 200. And last time I checked on the design professional, it didn't matter about where the project was at, because they're mostly working in the same offices that they design all these at.
Yeah.
Plus, we've already got, or should already have, I get that we're rearranging this, but the O'Brien situation was, we were designing something that we could use on different sites, so we weren't recreating something brand new every time. So that's the numbers that are sticking out to me, is the FF&Es, and especially the professional services. I know it's the smallest number on here, so, you know, what are we gonna, you know, we're jumping over dimes here, maybe, or jumping over dollars to look at dimes, but I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, so professional services is not the design of the project. That is actually a separate number. So our professional services, this is solely just construction phase professional services. So this consists of the environmental oversight, so the hazardous abatement consultants that we need to hire for oversight of that. It includes construction management. It includes special inspections, and roof inspections, and then building commissioning. So again, we did add I believe, if I remember correctly, about 10% escalation from our O'Brien numbers. And then I think we add a little bit more contingency onto that, just in case.
And I understand these obviously aren't hard fixed numbers
Sure.
yet. But is there a possibility, as these numbers are getting bigger and bigger on these professional services, can we request a breakout of these so we can at least be keeping track of where those numbers are going also from one school to the next?
Sure.
With some explanation.
Yeah.
I think for me, it'll make it easier.
Yeah.
I know I've had a thorn in my side when we're doing a CMAR project and then
Right.
hiring a CM, so
Understood.
thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you for the information. We'll
Absolutely.
see you again in February.
Okay.
Actually, we'll see you again
you
right
again right
now.
now.
So moving on
One
to
more.
item 2.05, presentation and discussion to update the Capital Funding Protection Committee on the Central Transportation Yard improvements.
All right, on the home stretch. We can go ahead and advance. Oh,
Not on non-action items.
all righty, this is our update on our central transportation project. We could go ahead and advance to background or history. All right. So a little bit of history on this project. This one has been going on for quite some time. We originally started a master plan study for all three of our transportation sites back in May of 2020. And Central Transportation Site did rise to the top of a complete modernization and rebuild of that site. So we did begin a conceptual design at that time in 2022, brought that to this committee and the board, and design funding was approved in December of 2022. So again, we have been working diligently on our designs, and our design is culminating for this project again in about 30 days. So the justification really for this project originally started really due to flooding at that site and the location. The building has been flooded numerous times over the years. We actually ended up moving our grounds building from that site down to our Brown Center location. We have underground fuel tanks there as well, which of course aren't great during a flood. But in addition, the fuel dispensers, the fuel monitoring at that site are quite outdated. We can't get parts. So it's been quite problematic. It's actually been, I think, shut down a few times over the past few years. Safety and security at that location is definitely an issue. Doesn't have great lighting or security in regards to cameras, etc. Our parking is inadequate. A good majority of the staff parks their cars on the Kleppy Lane Street, which quite frankly shouldn't be happening. And then, of course, just improving the workspace in general for the staff and the drivers. There's 192 staff that work at that site, and their training facilities, et cetera, really are not appropriate. So the scope of our project really is to completely demolish the white fleet and yellow fleet, the shops and their office buildings, constructing a new building that will house both functions. Right now they're separate buildings. And then construct a new bus wash and above ground fuel tanks and dispensers, and rework the overall circulation and parking for the site. This is just giving you a lay of the land of the existing plan and how it lays out now. The phase 1 and 2 really is all the clouded area in red on the east side of the site. That is where our white fleet exists. That is where we would demo that whole side first, construct the new building on that east side, and then phase 3, what we're calling phase 3, it would be demolishing the yellow fleet on that side and then completely redoing that parking lot on that west side. So this is our proposed plan showing the new building on that east side with the new entrance on the east side, parking, and the bus parking on the west side. We have the fuel islands and the fuel dispensers and our wash bay sort of in the center of the site, so buses can just pull right into that center drive aisle, drive straight through, get their services, and pull out the north side of the site. We are including 2 EV chargers for buses at this site at this time in our scope. But we do have alternates in our bid package to provide infrastructure for another, I think it's 20 or so EV buses, assuming that's kind of where we're headed, most likely. So this is our floor plan. It's about a 35,000 square foot building. Our existing buildings are around, I believe, 23,000 square feet right now. The office space, as you can see, is on the left side of the building, and there you can see the main entrance. That left side is constructed of conventional CMU, and then our shops on the right-hand side and the top are constructed of pre-manufactured metal building. We are moving our dispatch group from our south facility into this site for better radio coverage. We've provided a decent training facility and conference room and break room for the staff. Again, I think it's like 192 people. It's a lot of people coming in and out of the site. The bus bays, we are increasing that shop space by 3 new bus bays and 1 new White Fleet bay for maintenance. These are the elevations of the new building. You can see the entry there on the left-hand side on the top. We have a small covered patio for staff, so right outside the break room, so they can come outside, sit outside for lunch. We have a mezzanine there that you see that's popping up. We're using that for our HVAC equipment. And then you can see the White Fleet shops on the right-hand side there. On the bottom drawing on the left-hand side, we have created this sort of outside drive for really quick maintenance for the buses. They can pull in, maybe get, air in their tires, change a windshield wiper, little quick things, and then they can drive out and instead of having to drive through the main shop. And that's it on that slide. So our construction phase estimates for this project are between $60 and $65 million. That is based on a $55 million estimate for construction only from a third party. And again, includes professional services that are listed below. We do have 1 or 2 additional professional services part of this project due to the environmental fuel tanks and that type of thing. And then, of course, our FF&E. Our schedule, again, we'll be complete with design in about 30 days and roll right into permitting. We are planning on bidding this project also in March after approval of this committee for funding, and then rolling into construction in June. We plan on bidding our phase 3 of this project in December of 25, and then completion of the building probably spring. I'm hoping earlier than June, and then finishing up that parking lot on the west side the summer of 26. Just a note about the bidding schedule, I know it is almost mirroring the bidding schedule for Vaughn. We are really, really sensitive to that, so we are offsetting the bid due date between those 2 projects by about 2.5 weeks. So they won't be bidding exactly at the same time. Our next steps for this project, again, are to come back to this committee for phase 1 construction phase approval in February of 24, and again for phase 2 in December of 2025. This is informational presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
All right. Any questions on this one, Mr. Ivory?
I don't know if I missed it in the presentation, or is this a hard bid project, or is this a
It
CMARC?
is, yes.
It's a hard
I
bid.
should have pointed that out.
Okay.
It is a hard bid.
And then the next question is, I'm just curious on the buses. So how many buses will this facility house, I guess?
Yeah, let me get that for you. So we're providing 220 stalls for, right now, currently they have 187 buses. So we do have some room for growth, a little bit of growth there.
Okay, and we're projecting, so we're going to have 2 EV stations with an expansion of 20
more. Mhm.
20 more,
Yep.
which is going to be about 10%. So I guess my question is, what's going to happen in 10 years if we've got an entirely electric bus system? I'm not saying we're going to have 10 years, but 10, 15 years. What's the?
Well,
Is it even? Let me ask you this: is it even possible to get enough power on site to charge 220 buses?
that's a great question. Probably not. You'd probably have to increase the power at that time. But for now, we're planning on the 20. It's been kind of a slow process up to now, even with, we just got our first 2 EV chargers down at our south site. However, there's a lot of grants out there right now, it sounds like, that are coming out for EV buses. So that's why we at least wanted to accommodate 20. We're not sure how quickly that
Well, and I know
might
that
happen.
obviously on a much smaller scale, but with the tablets that we're putting at all the schools, we're learning a lot about how you charge things, because you can't plug in 1,500 tablets at one time, right?
Yeah.
So they have to go into carts and stuff. So I guess my next question would be, when you're charging a bus
Yeah.
for a day-long use, does it take, does it take 8 to 12 hours to charge it, or is it something that 20 charging stations is actually going to be able to charge 60 buses?
Yeah, so I do know that there's different ways of charging depending on, I think it's the rectifier that you buy. There's different types that can accommodate. In this case, we wanted to be able to charge at least 20 buses at one time, so we had to buy a certain type of rectifier. But there's other types that will charge in sequence over more hours. So I would think that at some point, that's kind of what almost we might have to do on at least a portion of buses, right? That's the best I can answer that question.
I guess all I would ask then
Yeah.
maybe is, because this is going to be a facility that I think we would all expect is going to be used over the next 50 years.
Yes.
That I don't know if there's an opportunity to maybe partner with, we got some pretty smart people in this town. So I got a feeling maybe we pull some Tesla people in, some people in, and maybe educate us so that we're at least not, hey, nobody loves to drive down a freshly paved road that's got a ditch right up the middle of it, because all of a sudden we got to add something else to it, right? So that's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
is
no, understood. Point taken.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right. That takes us on to item number 3.02. Our next meeting will be February 1st, 2024, presumably in this very same room, 4 o'clock. Yeah, unless we build another one between them. That's right. Exactly. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting.